Welcome to the Crossview Commons, a podcast focusing on the ministries, ministry partners, and the people of Crossview Church. My name's Mark Lanting, and it's my pleasure to share with you what God is doing in and through Crossview Church in DeKalb, Illinois. Today, I'm pleased to have Jacob and Sarah Bell with us. Welcome, both of you.
Hello.
Thanks for having us.
I'm happy to have you here. It's fun to have the podcast back. It's been a while since we've recorded, but this will be a great start to the new season. So thank you so much for making yourselves available for it.
You're welcome. It's our pleasure, really.
Yeah, so we have some things to talk about. We want to talk a lot about your involvement with Crew, your plans, and where the future is going to bring you, and different things along that line. But before that, how about each of you share a little bit about just yourself? How long have you been married, first of all? I know it's not very long.
Almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years.
End of April.
Yeah, because I believe
Time flies.
I met you, Jacob, when you were engaged to Sarah.
That's right, yeah.
And we're subsequently married, so still congratulations, you know.
Thank you.
Almost
It's still
2
fun.
years, yeah.
Still exciting.
Yeah, that's good. That's great. And I'll start with you, Jacob. Where'd you grow up? What's your background?
So I come from the Joliet area.
Yeah.
I lived in many different suburbs around there. Didn't come from a Christian home, so I'll definitely delve into more of that later, but that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, that's cool. What about you, Sarah?
I grew up mostly in Elgin.
Yeah.
I lived in a few other parts of the suburbs and actually in Louisiana for 4 years in elementary school. The only thing I kept from that is that I do think that we all should be using y'all. I think English should have a plural you, and that's very important to me.
Yeah. I know Tim Mackey on Bible Project insists on it when they're speaking of the collective commandments and things like that.
Yes.
He'll use the y'all, and he's a Bible scholar, so you're right.
Thank you so much. So many other languages, they've got one word for you and one word for the group of you, and English doesn't, and I think it's one of our biggest failings as a language.
That's great. So what do you do these days, Sarah? What keeps your life occupied and busy?
Yeah, so for work, Jacob and I both work with Crew here at NIU, but we're in a season of raising support right now, so most of our work is just reaching out to people, sharing about our ministry, and sharing ways that we're looking for people to partner with us in that. But outside of work hours, I like to knit, I like to read. I just started sewing last year, so I'm working on some sewing projects as well. I think that I'm trying to speed run getting to retirement age with all of my hobbies.
Those are good hobbies. I mean, my mom sewed our clothes when we were kids.
So did my mom.
Yeah.
It's
So
very
I remember, her buying the patterns and whatnot, and the materials, and so And then knitting. What do you like to knit? What do you make?
I make a lot of hats.
All right.
I do that a lot. That's probably the most consistent
Did you make the
thing.
hat that he was wearing?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the third
That's
hat
a nice
I've made.
hat.
The walking billboard of Sarah Church Bell.
Exactly.
That's cool. And so, Jacob, what are some of your interests? What are you into?
So we have a dog, so that's first and foremost. Absolutely love her. Her name's Maybelline, so she keeps me very busy. But I also like to read Christian books. I've actually been getting into Japanese manga, so that's some fun reading on the side there. But exercise is pretty important to me, so that's a couple of things that I'm interested in.
Yeah. So you're big into weightlifting?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Cool.
At least used to be. I had an injury about 7 years ago where pretty much I have tendinitis in my bicep, so mostly cardio nowadays.
Yeah.
But ideally weightlifting soon.
Yeah, I should be doing both, and I haven't been for a while, but maybe you'll provide me some inspiration. Well, let me hear a little bit about your faith journeys. Jacob, you said you come from a background where you didn't come up in a Christian home. What was that like, and what changes came in your life?
Yeah, so it's honestly surprising to me, even now. I mean, I've been a Christian for, is it 7 years, would you say, Sarah?
It was November 2017.
Yeah, so I'm not
7
the
and a
greatest
half.
at math,
I
but
think
7
a
and a
little
half.
over 7.
So for me, I really didn't have Christian friends, family. We kind of had early roots of Christianity where I was actually baptized as a baby in the Lutheran Church.
Oh, yeah.
And then it was pretty quickly after I don't really have any memories of being in church because I was so young, but pretty quickly after a few years down the road, being born, we just stopped going. And kind of the impetus for that was, unfortunately, my parents had a divorce.
Oh, sure.
And kind of the general consensus in the household is if God is real, then why this brokenness? So that's kind of an undertone in my family is brokenness. So if there was any thought about God, it's like, God, why? Going throughout life, I didn't really have interest in God. The people I was hanging out with also felt similar. I don't even know if I ever heard the gospel before. And fast forward through my life, I started partying in high school and continued onward in college. And there was a big turning point, though, for faith for me my sophomore year in college. I remember distinctly one night I was home alone, and my mom, she was out working, and I have this thought, do I believe in God? And it really struck me. I'm like, I don't know. I've heard of prayer maybe once or twice, so I decided to pray. I'm like, God, I don't know if you're real, but would you show yourself to me?
Nice.
And I'll follow you.
Wow.
Soon after that, I was also working at a warehouse part-time while I was a student. When I went into work, I started conversing with somebody, and about an hour into our conversation, I was like, hey, I think there's a God, but I don't know who it is. What do you think about that? And at this warehouse, this guy, he's a truck driver, but he was also a part-time pastor, and I actually did not know that until we started talking further. And he's like, hey, you should read the Bible, Jesus is Lord, and so forth, go to church, whatnot. And in my head, I'm like, that sounds great, but I don't know if that's real. It's like I think I've gone to church once or twice. So I mentioned, when I was really young, I don't really have too many memory of it. But that's kind of what I took from that conversation is like, yeah, I guess I'll try this church thing. I don't know who God may be. I went home, and it was maybe a couple weeks later, my mom came with me, and we went to a church about 45 minutes out. And I encountered God, to say it shortly, where this was during Christmas time. And we're used to Christmas music. We play it every year, and it's awesome. But for me, it had a totally different meaning being there in the church. And I remember hearing "Hark the Herald Angels Sing."
Yeah.
And the gospel is beautifully portrayed.
Absolutely.
Glory to the newborn King. And I often didn't cry at that point in time. A little more sensitive now, and I'll definitely tear up. But back then, I didn't do that. But I was crying. I just remember tears coming down and just really feeling like I was home for maybe the first time in my life. And as the sermon went on, I really felt a call to accept Christ, to repent of my sin and follow him. And they're actually doing baptisms that day. In this particular church, they were open to spontaneous baptisms. So I went ahead and I just got baptized.
Right on.
So came Christ, got baptized, and that's the brief coming to faith. There's more beyond that, but I'll just leave it there for now.
So what did you wear after baptizing spontaneously?
So I actually remember wearing khaki jeans, and I had a nice shirt on. And my mom, she was actually very against me being baptized. My mom, obviously, she looks back fondly now, but at the time, she's like, you really dress nice. We're going to go to the grocery store after this. Are you sure you want to do this?
It's November.
This is November. It's cold. And I actually had to wrestle a little bit there for a minute, before I officially got baptized at the end of that service. And even when I got baptized, most of the church was gone. Most of the people left.
Wow, no way.
Yeah, so it was like one of the last ones that they did. They had a lot of people come forward.
Wow.
They had shorts for me to wear. They had a shirt, kind of like hand-me-down situation. But yeah, it didn't stop me, I guess.
That's really cool. I've honestly not heard of that happening. So what a neat opportunity, and clearly it worked out for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me ask just real quickly, what did discipleship look like for you after you received Christ in that moment? How did you just kind of learn more about the Bible, learn more about Jesus, and find fellowship and learn about disciplines and things like that?
So that was actually a big struggle for me. When I think of my coming of faith story, there's the official moment of accepting Christ, right? But then the discipleship journey continues. It starts and it continues. And I really didn't have much spiritual growth after that. There's this cool moment of coming to faith, and obviously it's like more of a dramatic situation. They did give me a Bible when I was baptized, and pretty quickly I went home. I was really into reading books at that time, just like I am now. And I opened up Genesis, the first book in the Bible. That's how you read books, cover to cover. And I got up to Genesis 20.
Wow.
And I'm like, man, I don't
fight.
understand this. Yeah. I can say now that Genesis is awesome, but then I'm like, this is kind of boring.
Yeah.
And I was discouraged. So I stopped reading. And at the time I was going to community college. And yet again, I mentioned earlier, no Christian friends, Christian family, none of that. So I was honestly kind of lost. I felt excited. I felt this desire to really grow in my faith, but I just didn't know where to go next from there. So eventually things did change, but
yeah. What changed?
Yeah. So for me, with this church 45 minutes away, it was really starting to become a problem. Yet again, that inner tension of I want to grow in my faith, but I don't know how. And my mom, she works multiple jobs. She's a very hardworking woman. One of those jobs is being a bartender.
Yeah.
And one of the guys that would come into her bar actually went to a church closer by to her house. It was only about 20 minutes away.
Sure thing.
So she asked me, like, hey, my son is, excited about this Christian thing. Can he join? And he's like, yeah, you can come with my family. So I got plugged into a church closer by, because that church that was farther out, we would only go about once a month.
Got it,
So it was a really distant kind of relationship there. But with this church, I started going every week, and I eventually started serving. And it was good kind of in an outward sense, but an inward growth, there was still a disconnect there. But kind of the turning point, the change for me, was I was a part of a young adult small group at this church. And I was going to community college at the time. And right before I transferred, I went to Illinois State University. About a month out, this was during Christmas time, we had a Christmas gathering, a party for the young adult small group. And they invited someone from the Navigators to come in and do a support raiser presentation. I've actually never met a missionary before, so it was a very interesting time. And I remember talking with this guy, and I'm sharing, like, hey, I'm about to go to Illinois State. I want to grow in my faith, but I don't know what to do. I've actually gone to Illinois State a couple of times before I became a Christian to party and things like that. And it's like, I don't want to do that anymore. But I'm scared that I need help. I'm scared. And turns out this guy, he's out in Indiana doing NAVs, but he grew up in the Bloomington-Normal area where Illinois State's located. So he said, hey, let me get you connected to campus ministry. We don't have NAVs, but we do have Crew. And they were actually going to launch a Navigators ministry at Illinois State. They didn't see the need at the time. But his wife discipled someone who was Crew staff.
All right.
And they were off staff, but there was someone that they knew that was currently on staff. So when I came to Illinois State a week before classes started, I met this staff member who then went on to disciple me for the whole time I was at Illinois State. So that was really big in my discipleship journey.
Yeah. So I had to keep digging, but I had a sense that this was going to go somewhere awesome, and it did. So, and it's going to connect so well with our discussion going forward. Thank you so much for sharing your heart and your testimony, and
Absolutely.
That's just beautiful. And what I see, Sarah, maybe you see the same thing, are these touch points along the way.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Starting with just you and God alone, and one step at a time. He never let you go, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about your faith and journey and what that's been like for you?
Absolutely. And also a fun fact, the staff guy who discipled Jacob also discipled Stu when he was in Bloomington.
Nice.
So he's responsible for a lot of great people in our church now.
Fantastic.
But yeah, so I grew up in a Christian home. I would say I became a Christian when I was like 3 or 4 years old. I remember understanding that like God loves me, but because of my sin, I can't love him and be with him. So if I ask Jesus to forgive me and come into my heart, then I can know God. And so I prayed for that to happen. And it just was all very like normal to me. Like I would go to church. I started Awana as soon as I was old enough for it. My parents both were like really actively involved in serving in the church. I like was at youth group every single week as a teenager. There's a point in my life when I was at my church building more days in a week than I wasn't, like for a full year. And so it was just like the air that I was breathing. And then when I was a senior in high school, my younger brother, who has some genetic health issues, was hospitalized for a month with kidney failure. And that just kind of really rocked my faith and trust in God. Of like, so I've read the Bible my whole life. I've studied it. I've memorized it. I know that God says that he's good and that he loves his people, but there's this really hard thing that someone I love is experiencing. And no matter how much I pray or my family prays or a church prays, nothing's changing. And it just felt like I couldn't reconcile those two things. But I stayed home for 2 years doing community college, so I kept going to the same church and just kept doing everything I'd been doing. And it wasn't until I transferred out here to NIU that I kind of had to like actually face the way that I was feeling. But I started going to Cru right away here because I had a few friends from high school who went here. And I didn't have a car on campus. My sister took the car that we shared with her when she left. So I live, she's in Wisconsin. I was closer. My parents were like, we can just come pick you up if we need to. But my friends from high school had offered to like drive me back to the suburbs if I ever needed to get back for anything. So I was like, well, they need to know that I'm on campus. So if I call them out of the blue needing a ride, they're aware. So I came to Cru on Thursday night, and then the person who was leading the Bible study for my dorm was somebody else I knew from high school. And I was like, well, now I have to go to that as well. I'm just getting back into all this stuff. So I would go to Bible study on Wednesdays. I would go to Cru on Thursdays. I started coming to CrossFit during that time too with a friend of mine. But the rest of the week, I was just really wrestling with God of like, I just don't know how I can trust you whenever I'm seeing these things that don't make sense.
Yeah.
And I reached a point by the end of the semester where I felt like I need to see God do something really big, or I don't know how I can keep believing in him and following him. And I had signed up for winter conference with Cru, which was in Indianapolis. I thought everyone was doing it. I thought this was like the event to be at. I got there. There's 25 of us from NIU, which is like a good amount, but that's about a quarter of the total students who were involved with Cru. So I was a little surprised. But God wanted me there.
Yeah.
But I went into this conference with this idea of like, okay, if God doesn't meet me at this event that's specifically designed for me to encounter God, then like I'm out. I can't keep doing this anymore. I have other friends with cars. I'll be fine. And the first night we were there, the speaker talked about the story of seeing fireflies for the first time as a kid, and used that as this metaphor for like the beauty of fireflies we can only see in the dark, and God's beauty and love and goodness shines brightest in the midst of the brokenness and pain of this world. Like,
there you go.
It's in that contrast that we see the beauty and the love of who God is. And I just started crying. And then,
So that was for you in that moment at that time.
Exactly. Out of the 3,000 college students there, that one was for me. And then every session after that, like everything I attended that whole week, there was something about like God's goodness and love for us being true regardless of our circumstances. And I just left that conference so excited about walking with Jesus. I started like reading my Bible and praying every day, which I hadn't been doing for years, and like dove into Cru. Danica started discipling me pretty quickly after that, which is so fun. She's the greatest. And I just like saw God moving in my life in a way that I hadn't before. And it was just really, really exciting to see that. And that's a really big part of why I work with Cru now, of like, I just feel like God changed my life so much through Cru, and I want to be part of that for other people.
Yeah, wow, this is the interview that does itself. I mean, you know, your testimonies are so laced in the work that you're going to be doing. Just one comment, you know, I recently, just last Thursday, was doing a devotional. I lead the Global Connection team here. And I read John 1 because Jeff had read from it a couple weeks ago.
It's a great passage.
Yeah.
It's so good.
And it just got me thinking about people who have... what's it called when they walk away from faith now? The word
deconstructed.
Yeah, deconstructed, or for other reasons had left the faith. Right. So I have people in my life who have done those things.
Yeah.
And I really had to wonder. You know, did they know this Jesus of John 1? Did that Jesus interface in their life?
Yeah.
And I don't mean to question their loyalty or their faith, but I do question, did they have Jesus in their life in a way where, as you did right now, you recognize that even in those dark times, you see the light of Christ, right? Yeah. Because he does care and he does love. He is our friend. And so it made me sad because the people I know who I've walked with have become very bitter. And,
It's hard.
you see stuff on social media, which I'm not on right now, where, they would post their bitterness. It's just so sad.
Yeah,
You don't
it
want to
is.
retort against it, right? But both of you have stories where you authentically cried out to God, right? And what did God do when you cried out to Him? They weren't your happiest moments necessarily, right? There was desperation and sadness and confusion about the character of God, right? And that numero uno question in religion and philosophy is the problem of sin in our world, the problem of pain in our world, and our book's titled that, right? Because
Many.
these are the very real issues, but. When you get to know who Jesus is and that He understands and walks with us through that pain and experienced so much that we experience and is in the process of making all things new. And that process might be taking longer than we want. I'm not supposed to be preaching. I'm sorry. You just got
Jeff's job.
both of your testimonies really meant a lot to me, and thank you so much
glad.
for digging deep and for sharing, because that's the real stuff. And I think that people listening right now will be blessed by that too. So, one of my scripted questions was, how did you first come into contact with Cru? Well, both of you
Cover
had
that, baby.
really meaningful first contacts with Cru, right?
Yeah,
Where you
absolutely.
had relationships and discipleship, and you both use that word discipleship, I think.
Yeah.
And I like that very, very much. Tell me about Cru, because I know very little. What distinguishes Cru? What do you love about it?
Yeah, go ahead.
So Cru used to be called Campus Crusade for Christ.
Yeah, I
which
remember
is-
that.
That's
Yeah,
going to be more
yeah.
familiar to a lot of our people listening.
Older people.
Yes, anyone who has a conscious awareness of before 2008 is probably more familiar with that. But it's started as a campus ministry at UCLA out in California in the 50s, but has expanded a ton since then. So now it kind of functions as an umbrella ministry. So the main focus is campus ministry, which is what Jacob and I do. But there's some specific branches of campus ministry that reach they're called contextualized ministries that reach specific demographics. So that our heart is everyone can hear the gospel in a way that's going to be meaningful to them. So there's a branch of Cru that works with international students. There's one that works with Latino and Hispanic students. There is a branch that actually started at NIU, fun fact for us, that reaches South Asian and South Asian American students. Several others. There's Athletes in Action, which the Batiste were with still are.
And that's a
just
Cru
not here.
affiliate,
That's
right?
that's part of Cru. And then there's also Family Life, which reaches families. There's the Jesus Film is a Cru ministry as well, which is super cool. I did not know that until we joined staff.
And that has a huge
That is-
international reach.
yes.
So now you're crossing over with my global work, where I've seen amazing things
Yes.
happen with that movie. Yeah.
It's the most translated film by miles.
Fantastic. I didn't know that was a Cru thing. Honestly.
I know. Isn't
Yeah.
that crazy? So that's super fun. And then there's a couple other things. I truly don't think I could list every single thing. But what we do is campus ministry. So we work with college students.
Yeah. What are you most excited about as you look toward really a career with Cru at this point?
I remember telling, so my discipler, back when I joined Cru at Illinois State, he actually kept a bunch of quotes that people would say that were really silly. And I remember when I joined my first year as a missionary, and I figured out what the majority of my time was going to be doing as a missionary with Cru. And what that was is evangelism, discipleship. It's sharing your faith and discipling, pouring into students on an intimate level. And I'm like, man, I feel like a kid at a candy store. This is just amazing. Are you serious? This is my job? This is, yes, valuable work. But that, honestly, I'm so excited to be doing that.
Yeah.
I'm excited I know both of us are feeling similar, but with Northern Illinois University, the particular students I'm excited to reach is both American students, but also international students.
It's a huge international population.
Mm-hmm. So back at Illinois State University, that's where I started out with Cru as a missionary. My first year, it was about a third of my time was working with international students. And then my second and final year, I only did international student ministry. So I'm hoping to split my time. I'm not too sure on the international student ministry end. I know with the American ministry, it's very vibrant with Cru. But it's kind of more of an explorative phase, I would say, with international students, what
Yeah.
they look like.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, one of the things I love about college campuses is that it is truly an international mission field. You have people from, well, you mentioned the Southeast Asian focus. There's a huge number of Southeast Asian folks at NIU and African. I mean, I've been on campus enough to say, this is a different, a huge Arabic population too. My kid works with Neighbor's House.
Okay,
Gideon's Court and is primarily working with Asian kids, and they love it.
That's
You know,
awesome.
so what a great way to network into the rest of the world, right? Because who knows? I mean, what these young people will be bringing home or FaceTiming,
Yeah.
WhatsApping, and things like that, and the experiences that they may have as they encounter faith. Yeah. So, like, just in terms of quantity, you know, do you have a cadre of students that follow Crew, that go do all the stuff? Like, how many students are there? What's their makeup in general? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so I think, so we're not on campus right now, so we hear about this from the staff team there. But I believe that there's about 60 or 70 students who are consistently showing up to stuff, which is so great.
That's a big number.
When I started in fall 2019, we had about 90 students at any given event. And then fall 2021, which was my first intern year, as we're coming out of COVID, we had 8, and only 3 of them were around before COVID hit. So really since then has just been like this rebuilding phase, and trusting God to bring in students who are excited to reach other students. And the last 2 years have felt like, finally, like we're here. And it's a good mix of guys and girls. It's actually been skewing more heavily towards guys, which has been really interesting. That's unusual for religious groups. So that's been really exciting. We would love to see it be more like ethnically diverse too, because NIU is a very diverse campus, and we'd love for our Crew movement to reflect that. But they just had a spring break trip a couple weeks ago, and during the sharing time at the end, one of the students who's been involved since 2021 said, a couple years ago, we sat down in our leaders' Bible study and prayed talked about what a movement would look like. And we've been praying for that since. And I feel like now, this is what we've been praying for.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like that's part of maybe a nationwide movement that I'm sensing. Jeff has shared with me too. I don't remember if this is the pulpit or conversation, but kind of in our area, God's really moving right now. And we see it here at Crossview. We hear about it on NIU's campus, and we're hearing about it at other churches too. It's kind of hoping it was unique to Crossview. It's like,
we're special. God loves us more, actually.
That sounds very much like the apostles' mindset back in the day.
Yeah, Paul's going to get mad at us for that one.
No, it's exciting, right? And I think you're joining it exactly. Not that there would be a bad time, but a particularly exciting time where we're hearing old-fashioned words like revival and whatnot again, and so I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited about God moving on the college and university campuses all over, right? And so that's huge that you get to be a part of it. Now, I shared a little bit that Abby and I were missionaries back in the day, and we raised support, and we worked in the thinking of terms and years and things like. Do you think about what kind of term you're serving in, or is this, like a career move? What does this look like for you?
So predominantly with Crew, with long-term staff. So we've used the word intern earlier. So both Sarah and I, we did 2 internship years.
Got it.
Now we're long-term staff, and it's about a 3 to 5 year commitment. What we're signing on for is till the Lord tells us otherwise.
Okay, so it's like this is our career going forward, and we're not going to stop. Right. That's fantastic.
Our plan is to be in this for the long haul, but we don't know what God's plan is.
Right. But the idea is right now to build up this base, right, and to move forward and to stay here. And again, I can't tell you where God's going to lead you, or maybe I could.
I wish you could. I wish someone could.
But for right now, the plan is long haul NIU Crew. This is what we're doing. All right.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Yeah, that's cool. So I remember raising support and having support needs. And can you tell us where you're at in terms of support needs right now? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so we just recently hit 80% of our funding goal which is super exciting. We're very thrilled about that. And the way that Crew works with support raising is you're required to hit 100% before you're able to report to your ministry location. So right now our full-time job is meeting with people, sharing about needs, talking about what our ministry will look like. We're also still really connected to the staff team here, so we're aware and connected with what's happening on campus, even though we aren't the boots on the ground at the moment. But our goal is a little bit shy of $10,000 a month, which sounds like a lot. We're not making $120 a year. Don't worry about that.
We're in it for the money.
No missionary ever has been like, this is the goal here. But it's a breakdown of part of that is our salaries, part of that is healthcare expenses, part of that is ministry expenses, retirement, a retirement plan, a couple other things. We have to raise the tax amount that comes out of our salaries. So
and then percent usually goes to Crew as well for administrative costs and things like that. And that's just how it works when you're with an agency, right? And that's really cool. So that's great. And really, once you hit that 80%, you're starting to see light at the end. But what you need are people to come along and say, I will be part of that 20% that gets you there. I remember people committing to just 1% or something that meant a lot, right? And we would count those 1%, right? And it meant so much because people were truly giving and making a difference. And so
we crunched the numbers lately, and if 19 more people join our team at $100 a month, we'd be fully funded.
Yeah, right.
So 19 is not a lot of people.
It's not, I remember having very similar matrix in my head, right? And that kind of calculus going all the time. So as we talk about your support needs, how can people connect with you? How can people, if they so choose, become really a part of your team? Because it is a lot more than financial giving. It's becoming a part of what you're doing, hearing from you and praying for you and those kinds of things. So what are next steps for people?
You can come and find us at church.
Yeah.
If you don't know who we are, which is very understandable, you could talk to Stu, especially, we know very well, but Jeff or Nolan could connect you to us as well. I do announcements and worship, so I'm a little bit more visible if you see me there. Or I have a mailbox in the church office because I'm part of the community connections team. It says Sarah Whitchurch Bell, so you can leave a note there with your contact information if you want.
What about email, website, anything like that?
Emails are good.
Yeah, so we have emails. We have a very brief Adobe Express website. I don't know the URL on the top of my head.
The URL is just a string of letters, and no one's going to write that down.
Yeah.
But what about an email address or some way?
So our emails are just our first name and last name at crew.org. So it's jacob.bell@crew.org, and then sarah.whitchurch, that's WHIT church, at crew.org. That is because I have not legally changed my name yet. I know we've been married for 2 years. There's a lot of paperwork. But I have to get a new license this year and a new passport. So I'm gonna do it for real.
You better make sure she does this stuff, man.
I know Sarah loves me. It's okay. She's really not 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out. Or anything
email's helpful, and also if you guys who are listening don't know Jacob and Sarah, I am happy to introduce whomever to you all as well. Social media, are you guys on it? Is there, if people want to follow you.
I have an Instagram.
Yeah.
I have not posted in 2 years.
Yeah,
I'm on there. I'm on there.
We're both not really on social
I'm
media
not
as well.
so
It probably would be helpful, but
I might be on there more. I don't know, but it's Sarah Whitchurch Bell on Instagram.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
So
and no worries about that. I am never one to try and convince people to be on social media more. I am in fact quite the opposite. Warning I teach English 101 and I mean these students are really on to this generation. I think is more aware of the pitfalls and the dangers and just the ugliness. And so I've been really impressed that they're writing about don't do the dating apps, or writing about don't do this or that social media. So no, I'm fine with you guys not doing that. Just a really long answer.
Yes.
That's really good. Well, it's been a delight having you both here and hearing your testimonies, especially, and hearing about your exciting work with Crew. Anything that you want to say to close us out?
No, I was going to try to come up with something clever and funny, and then I couldn't think of anything.
We don't need clever and funny. That's fine.
but it's
No
so much
comments
fun.
on my end either. I'm glad to be
No
here.
comments.
No, and you should really well. So I want to thank you both for being here and for being a part of Crossview Church. And you're both great, and I appreciate you. And I want to thank you all for joining us. Services here at Crossview are on Sundays, 9 and 10:45, and they're streaming online at those times. For more info on Crossview, visit our website at crossviewefca.com.